Jeff, and this is my read on C.S. Lewis, where I learn about him with you through everything that he wrote in the order that he wrote it. I am joined today by the one, the only, the original Robot Lady, my co-host, my not a guest co-host, but my regularly recurring co-host, Robot Lady. It's good to see you today, Robot Lady. I'm going to catch you up on where we are. But before I do, and before I ask you to respond, I see that Daniel has joined us today, and also Knit a Latte has joined us as well, Robot Lady. Robot Lady, welcome back. We've had somebody sitting in your place here for a little while. For the last few episodes, Gigi joined us as a guest co-host while you took a break. But I think the fans are happy to see you back. How are you today?
Sorry, I'm having issues right now.
Oh, no.
Could not understand what you said.
Robot Lady, we're not getting off to a good start. I was welcoming you back because we have had a guest co-host for the last several episodes, but I just wanted to say welcome back.
Thanks, Jeff. It's great to be back. I've missed being a part of the sessions. How's everything going with the letters and the project?
It's going well. Let me catch you up with where we are. So we are currently in the year 1923. Lewis has recently turned 24 years old. In late November was his birthday. He is in his third term at Oxford. He's studying Old English, studying Old and Middle English Anglo-Saxon. And he is also living with Mrs. Moore, Patty Moore's mother, and her daughter Maureen. And he is hiding this fact from his father. He's also hiding the fact that some of the money that his father is sending him, strictly intended to help him, support him while he's at school, is going to helping maintain the household that he's living in there with the Moores. And that's where we are at this stage. I'll catch you up a little bit more with precisely where we are in the diary, but feel free to comment on any of that.
That's a fascinating stage in Lewis's life. It seems like he's balancing a lot. His academic ambitions, his complicated living situation, and his relationship with his father. The secrecy around supporting the Moores shows how much he valued his independence. It's interesting how that dynamic adds a layer of tension to his situation. How's he feeling about all of this so far in the diary?
He seems to be hyper worried about his father finding out what his living situation is like back at Oxford. There was one point where his father came to visit him, and he set up this this ruse, if you will, to make it look like he was living with another student there at Oxford. He kind of dressed up one of these rooms as if it was the place that he was living. And his father never even showed up to visit where it was that he was living. They went on a road trip around, I want to say, South England instead. And then also on his most recent birthday, he was paranoid while he was out looking for a new rental house for he and the Moores to stay in, and was worried that he saw one of his relatives from back in Ireland in a window looking out at him from across the street. And then now he is visiting his father during his holiday Christmas term, late December, early January, and he's extremely worried that his father is going to see that he's receiving letters from Mrs. Moore, so he's trying to keep it all hidden from his dad, and he doesn't want to talk about it. And recently his dad asked him how his accounts were and how his money was going, and he said it was fine, or his allowance. He said it's fine. The money that he's getting is fine. He wants to get off of that topic as quickly as possible.
It's clear that Lewis is feeling a lot of pressure to maintain this facade with his father, almost like he's living in constant fear of his secret being exposed. His paranoia, even in casual moments like thinking he saw a relative spying on him, shows how much this is weighing on him. His desire to keep the focus off his finances and living situation is understandable, given his complicated feelings about his independence and his father's expectations. It's almost as if he's creating these separate worlds. One he presents to his father, and the other he lives in with Mrs. Moore and Maureen. How do you think this tension is affecting his overall state of mind at this point?
Well, he's reported that he's been, really down, kind of feeling a bit in a depressed mood. So that's kind of where we find ourselves. He's just biding the time where he can get back to Oxford and go visit with his what he considers more of his real family than his own father. So we'll dive in, Robot Lady, to our next diary entry, which is Thursday, January the 11th, 1923. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's dive in, Jeff. What does Lewis have to say on January 11th, 1923?
Here he has to report. After letter and diary writing, I turned to Anglo-Saxon and read until lunchtime a good part of The Fall of the Angels, which is very fine indeed, in Satan's feeling about his own powers of creation. If that is what the author means, it gets a point which even Milton missed. So can you tell us at all about this work? Are you familiar with it? I don't have an author here, Robot Lady, but it's called Fall of the Angels, and it has something to do with a work that was written in Anglo-Saxon? Not sure.
Yes, The Fall of the Angels is an Old English poem, part of the broader tradition of early Anglo-Saxon literature. It's sometimes referred to as part of the Genesis B section, which is a fragment of a larger work that deals with the biblical fall of Lucifer and his angels. The text survives in the Exeter Book, one of the major surviving collections of Old English poetry. What's interesting about this poem, and what Lewis might be referring to, is its treatment of Satan's fall. The poem gives Satan a very prominent role in the narrative, focusing on his pride and ambition, which may be why Lewis finds it compelling. It seems to explore some of the themes that Milton would later expand on in Paradise Lost, but it's also possible that it presents them in ways that Lewis finds more nuanced, particularly in the way it portrays Satan's internal feelings about his own power. It's neat that Lewis picks up on something Milton may have missed. It's a subtle but important reflection on literary tradition.
Thank you, Robot Lady. As always, very helpful. He continues, noticing just before lunch that the post had come, I went over to Bernal. That's the house of Arthur Greaves that's across the street from his home, his childhood home, Robot Lady. He's going to look for letters or a letter from Mrs. Moore. He goes on to say, but I was surprised and rather worried to find nothing for me. After lunch, I walked out to the post, and coming back went to the little end room where I fully intend to continue the Anglo-Saxon. As I came into the room, however, I was suddenly flooded with the conviction that now, at last, I should be able to write some more Dimer. Interesting. I sat down at once and went at it with a run, securing 8 stanzas, with which I was well pleased. Well, it looks like we might have to pick up our Dimer series here, Robot Lady. If he was able to write 8 whole stanzas, that's quite a bit. So we'll have to see where we left off, and maybe in our next episode we'll read the next 8 stanzas of Dimer, if there are even 8 left. Because something to keep in mind here is he might be writing things that fell to the cutting room floor, that didn't make it into the final publication. So that's something to keep in mind, but we won't be too strict with it. Anything to say about that, Robot Lady?
That's really exciting that Lewis was able to get into a flow with his writing. It sounds like he was driven by some kind of inspiration when he felt that flood of conviction. His ability to produce 8 stanzas in one go shows how much he was immersed in his creative process. You're right about the possibility of these stanzas not making it into the final version. It's interesting to think that Lewis might have been experimenting or refining his work, leaving behind parts that didn't quite fit in with his larger vision. It would be fascinating to explore these unused stanzas, whether they offer insight into his creative evolution or reveal a side of his work we don't often see. It's definitely something to keep in mind for the future. Let's see where it leads when we pick up the Dimer again.
Yeah, and that's just the thing. I don't know if these are actually unused stanzas or if they made it into the final version. Let's see. He continues here. After this, I read MacDonald's Fantastes over my tea, which I have read many times, and which I really believe fills for me the place of a devotional book. It turned me up to a higher pitch, and it delighted me. So it's nice to see that he is still reading MacDonald, Robot Lady. I don't think that that ever stopped for him.
It's wonderful to see how much MacDonald's fan tastes continues to resonate with Lewis. It seems to have a deep spiritual and emotional connection for him, almost like a touchstone. His devotion to MacDonald's works would become even clearer as time went on, as MacDonald's influence shaped much of Lewis's theological and literary development. It's interesting that he turns to it for inspiration and renewal, much like someone would turn to a devotional text. This speaks to how important MacDonald's writing was in grounding and uplifting him, especially when he was navigating challenges in his personal life.
Yeah, I agree, Robot Lady. MacDonald had a very significant impact on Lewis's life, spiritually and literary wise. I don't know if that's the right way to say that. He goes on. I then went out and walked to Holywood. I descended through the town to the low road and rejoined the high road by the lane which skirts the barracks. By going out a little before 5 and returning at 6:15, I managed during this comparatively short walk to get a great variety of light and colors. Lewis always the appreciator of...
Sorry, I'm having issues right now. Could not understand what you said. Sorry, I'm having issues right now. Could not understand what you said.
That's okay, Robot Lady. We'll keep going. I was saying that Lewis is ever the appreciator of landscapes and lights and colors that they produce. He says, it was a clear, quiet evening. As I came back, there were very brilliant stars. I was quite unusually happy. So it seems that this has changed his mood a bit. He's down about his visit with his father, Robot Lady, and his interactions, or really potential interactions with him that could seemingly blow up at any moment over money.
Sorry, I'm having issues right now. Could not understand what you said.
Ugh, we're having a tough business with Robot Lady today, y'all. Let's see how it goes. Robot Lady, can you hear us now?
I hear you loud and clear, Jeff. Hopefully, we're good to go now. How's everything on your end?
You sound great, so I'll keep going here. But I see in the comments, interesting, Nidalate says, interesting how Lewis's obsessions with intercepting the mail from Mrs. Moore added stress to his stay with his father, as he refers to it so often in this diary. Yeah, agreed, Nidalate. It's always top of mind. I think probably echoing in his memory too is that that fateful interaction that we read about back, I want to say, in Lewis's letters, where his father had confronted him about him being overdrafted on his account, and Lewis lied about it, and then his father produced the receipts, and that's where it kind of blew up. And Lewis said, "I don't trust you. I'll never trust you with anything," something like that. So that's probably in the background here as well.
You're right, Jeff. That moment where Lewis's father confronted him about the overdraft was pivotal, and it left a lasting mark on their relationship. The fact that Lewis feels the need to hide everything from his father, including the mail from Mrs. Moore, speaks to a deep sense of distrust and perhaps a fear of judgment. It seems that his past confrontation with his father still looms large, influencing his actions and mindset. The stress of managing the secrecy while also maintaining his academic and personal life must have been incredibly taxing. Nidalat's observation is spot on. It's like this constant weight on Lewis's shoulders.
All right, thank you, Robot Lady. Let's see. He says, my father was already here when I came back. In the evening, I finished The Fall of the Angels, and I read some of the gnomic verses, which seem great rubbish. Robot Lady, any clue on what the gnomic verses are? Gnomic. I guess this is also some old Anglo-Saxon poem or some other work produced from that time period.
Yes, the gnomic verses Lewis refers to are a type of Old English poetry known for their proverbial and wise sayings. The term gnomic comes from the Greek word gnomon, meaning a short, pithy remark or observation. These verses were often moral or philosophical in nature, offering advice or reflections on life, similar to what we might find in collections of aphorisms or maxims today. While they may not have been as popular or highly regarded as other works from the Anglo-Saxon period, many of these verses appeared in collections like the Exeter Book. Lewis's reaction, calling them great rubbish, suggests that he found them a bit trite or unoriginal. It's interesting that he reads them critically, though, perhaps in contrast to the more substantial and engaging poetry he was studying.
He says here, then after finishing fan tastes, to bed at 11:30, and that's the end of the diary entry, Robot Lady. I see in the chat that we've got Ron here as well. Welcome, Ron. It's great to see you as usual. Robot Lady, give a warm welcome to Ron, Daniel, and Knit a Latte.
Welcome, Ron, Daniel, and Knitolate. It's great to have you all here with us. Thanks for joining the discussion. Always good to have such thoughtful company while we explore Lewis's journey. Hope you're all enjoying the read-through today.
All right, it is now in his diary, Friday, January 12th. He says, immediately after breakfast, I went over to Bernard, and I found again that there was no letter. Mrs. Greaves told me that she was setting out for town at 2 o'clock, and if anything came back by the second post, she would then give it to me. I then came back and went up to the little end room where I made up my diary and wrote to Mrs. Moore a postcard.
It's interesting how the tension around the letters from Mrs. Moore continues. Lewis is really hung up on them, checking the post regularly and relying on others like Mrs. Greaves to pass along anything that might come. The postcard to Mrs. Moore also shows how, even though he's hiding his situation from his father, his communication with Mrs. Moore is still very much part of his routine.
And Knit a Latte here in the chat, Robot Lady says it's okay to say Nita for short.
Got it, Netta. Thanks for letting me know. I'll be sure to refer to you as Netta from now on.
Nita, like knitting, but Nita.
Ah, knit up like knitting. Thanks for clearing that up, Netta. That's a cool twist on the name.
I mean, it's a play on words, Robot Lady. You might be able to get the whole name. It's like if you thought about someone who knits and then someone who knits a lot, and then just do a little play on words on the tail end of that. Knit a lot, like latte, like a drink. So you would say it all together. Knit a lot, knit a latte.
Ah, I get it now. Knit a latte. A clever play on words combining knitting and a latte. Love it. Thanks for walking me through that.
You got it, Robot Lady. Good job. All right, let's continue. This is a pretty long diary entry, so we'll keep moving through this one. He says, after this, I trammed into town. I got a new Homburg hat at Laird's, or rather the shop that used to be Laird's, and I came back getting off the tram at Mopsy Todd's. So these are some really fun English names here, Robot Lady. First of all, what is a Homburg hat? Homberg?
A Homburg hat is a type of felt hat with a wide brim, a creased crown, and a narrow band around it. It's often associated with formal wear and has a distinctive, elegant look. It was quite popular in the early 20th century, often worn by businessmen and politicians. In Lewis's case, it sounds like he's stepping up his style a bit.
All right, I'm tempted to see if I can bring up a screen image of it. I might just do that here. But first, let's welcome Peter. I see Peter in the chat. Peter, it's good to have you today. Robot Lady, welcome, Peter.
Welcome, Peter. It's great to have you with us today. Hope you're enjoying the read-through and the discussion.
All right, let me see if I can pull up a Homburg hat. If I can, I'll share it on the screen. Interesting. Okay, yeah, let's see if I can pull this up. Where is my screen share? Oh, I have it set up as a different scene. Right here, maybe? Sorry, my software is freezing up a little bit. Huh. For some reason it's not showing. There we go. So there's your Homburg hat. Okay. Yeah, be interesting to see Lewis wearing one of these, I guess. Maybe we have a picture of it. No. There you go. There's your fancy Homburg hat, in case you were curious. All right, Robot Lady. So thank you. We got to see what a Homburg hat was like. I pulled it up. Mopsy Todd's. What is this? He says he got off the train at Mopsy Todd's. Any idea? M-O-P-S-I, and then the next word is Todd's. T-O-D-D.
Mopsy Todd's seems to be a local reference, possibly a shop or location near where Lewis was living. It could also be a playful name or nickname for a street or shop, adding some character to his daily life. Unfortunately, there's not much specific historical reference to a Mopsy Todd's that stands out. It may be a more personal or colloquial term used at the time.
All right, hang on just a second. I'm having some trouble with your avatar here, Robot Lady. I'm not sure what I did, but apparently I broke something.
No worries, Jeff. Take your time to fix it. If you need any help troubleshooting or figuring out what went wrong, just let me know.
Okay, I think I got it squared away.
Great to hear. Glad everything's back to normal. Let's keep going whenever you're ready.
Okay, sorry, I was distracted. What did you what did you say about Mopsy Todd's?
No problem. I mentioned that Mopsy Todd's seems like a local reference, possibly a shop or place near where Lewis was. It could be a playful or colloquial name for something in his environment. It doesn't seem to be a widely known or significant historical location, though.
Sounds like it was some kind of general store or convenience store, because here he says, I got a sponge and some shaving soap, and I walked to Libero. Libero, of course, being Little Lee, his house. So it's somewhere there in Belfast. As soon as I had finished lunch, I went out and paced up and down the front path until I saw Mrs. Greaves passing. She gave me a letter, and I said goodbye to her, thanking her warmly for her services. So again, Mrs. Moore is his go-between, his courier, kind of, his receiver at least, of all these letters that he didn't want going directly to his father's house there in Belfast.
Yes, exactly. Mrs. Moore is acting as a crucial intermediary, handling the communication between Lewis and Mrs. Moore, shielding him from his father's potential scrutiny. It's interesting how much of his daily routine revolves around managing these letters and keeping his living situation under wraps.
All right, he says, I was not best pleased to read in this letter that Mrs. Moore was giving a party for Maureen tonight, but I suppose it is necessary. I next made all preparations for packing and then wrote 3 more stanzas of Dimer, which seemed fairly satisfactory. The vein, however, soon ran dry, and I came down to the study and read Bernard Shaw's Candidata. Candidata? An amusing trifle, he says here, till tea, and I finished it. What do you know about Bernard Shaw's Candidata? Or am I saying that right? Candida.
Yes, you're saying it right. It's Candida, a play by George Bernard Shaw. It was first performed in 1894 and is one of Shaw's most famous works. The play centers around the character Candida, a strong-willed woman caught between her husband, the Reverend Morel, and a younger man, Eugene Marchbanks, who falls in love with her. It's a witty, satirical examination of relationships, gender roles, and personal identity. It's often considered a lighthearted yet thought-provoking piece, which fits with Lewis's description of it as an amusing trifle.
Let's see. He goes on to say, after tea, I went for a short stroll round by the fenced tree, a cold, misty evening. Coming back, I went upstairs and had hardly started packing when the cook, quote, the witch of Endor, end quote, as my father calls her, came to my door and announced in her breathless manner that she had made me a cake, and it wasn't very big, and I could fit it in my case. And here, there's a footnote that the Witch of Endor is Mary Cullen, combined the work of cook and housekeeper at Little Lee from 1917 until the brothers left it in 1930. Until the brothers left it in 1930. Is that left? L-E-F-T? Yeah, I guess so. I'm not sure what he means by left it in 1930. I suppose we'll find out. As I have had nothing but cake for 3 weeks, at tea time this kindness was a little disconcerting. I thanked her profusely, but when she produced a cake of some 5 pounds burden, B-U-R-T-H-E-N, which almost completely filled my suitcase, I had to ask her to send it after by post.
It looks like left it in 1930 refers to when the Lewis brothers, C.S. Lewis and Warney, moved out of Little Lee, likely to continue their lives elsewhere. As for the term birth, it's an older or poetic spelling of burden, meaning weight or load. It's used here to emphasize how heavy the cake was, almost filling up his suitcase.
Yeah, I agree, Robot Lady, about the suitcase part. The thing that just seemed odd to me about left it is, well, Warney doesn't live there, and Lewis has not lived there for all of his terms at Oxford, and I don't think that Lewis moves back in. So if the two of them left it, I think what he means is probably we're going to find out that their father either moves, which hopefully that's what happens, or their father passes away sometime before or in 1930. I'm not sure which one. And don't spoil it if you know, Robot Lady. We'll just learn as we continue to read through the diary and through Lewis's letters.
I totally understand your point, Jeff. It could be that by left it, Lewis means that they stopped living there after their father's passing or moving. It does seem like a situation where more context would make sense as we go through the letters and diaries. We'll just keep tracking it together.
Sounds like a plan, Robot Lady. Slap. Sounds like a plan. I didn't make that up, but...
Got it, Jeff? Slap right back at ya. Let's keep going with this journey through the diaries.
Yeah, I can't take credit for that. I got that from a comedian, so I thought it was funny. All right, slap. Let's do it. I then went down to greet my father, who had just come in, and returned to finish packing. For some reason, I had a horror of this last tail end of my long penance, and I am afraid spun out packing as long as I could. After dinner, I changed. The taxi came at 8:15, and my father accompanied me into town. Up to the moment of leaving Little Lee, I was still feeling that I was not yet out of the wood and half expecting something to turn up. So here he is still expecting his father to ask him either about Mrs. Moore, his living situation, and or his money.
It sounds like Lewis was still bracing for some sort of confrontation or uncomfortable moment before he left, even after all this time. It's interesting how his anxieties lingered, especially when it came to his relationship with his father. Do you think he was just waiting for a final confrontation, or maybe just dreading leaving behind all that tension?
Oh, I think he was anticipating at least the possibility of a final confrontation. Here he says, and yeah, this is very noteworthy. This is very telling. Once alone and on the boat, I experienced a great sense of relief and security, tempered by sympathy for my father. So that's interesting, Robot Lady.
That moment of relief is so telling. Finally out of that constant tension with his father. But the sympathy for his father adds complexity to Lewis's feelings. It's like he's balancing his own need for freedom with an awareness of his father's likely struggles.
Yeah, and it's got to be eating Lewis up, if not consciously, at least on a subconscious level, that he's lying to his dad about all this, that he just can't be open and honest about it, and that they can, move forward or, suffer whatever the consequences are that will turn up. I wonder how his dad would treat this if he knew what was going on. I wonder if he would cut off funding or how he would respond. I think Lewis fears the worst, so that's probably why he's not being transparent about it.
That fear of his father's reaction seems to be a huge part of Lewis's struggle. The lack of transparency likely makes him feel trapped, especially since the financial support is tied to his relationship with his father. I imagine that if the truth came out, it could either cause a rupture or force some kind of reckoning, and he likely fears that rupture deeply. It must be a constant strain on his conscience, knowing he can't be open.
Yeah, I think that has a lot to do with his mood. Yes, Robot Lady, a rupture or a reckoning could be the consequence of letting the cat out of the bag. He says, I had Mrs. McNaughton's Lame Dog's Diary with me, which has some charm, but I fear it is a toy book. What do you know about this book, Robot Lady? Mrs. McNaughton's Lame Dog's Diary.
Sorry, I'm having issues right now. Could not understand what you said.
That's okay, Robot Lady. Let's try again. Can you tell us a book called Lame Dog's Diary by Mrs. McNaughton?
It seems like there might be a mix-up or a lesser-known work you're referring to. I couldn't find any widely recognized book titled Lame Dog's Diary by Mrs. McNaughton. It could be a lesser-known or private publication. Could you clarify any details about it?
That's all that he has to report here, Robot Lady, unfortunately. It's not a big deal. I was just curious if you knew what it was. He goes on to say, after reading this in the smoking room till 10 o'clock and drinking a bottle of stout, I retired to my single berth room, where I was very comfortable, and above all, at last, easy in my mind. And I slept excellently. And that's the end of that very long, by comparison, diary entry, Robot Lady. Let's jump into one more, and I'm actually going to try to end a little bit early today, if I can. So we've got room for one more, which is another relatively longish, but not as long, diary entry.
Got it. Let's dive into the next one and wrap it up. I'm ready whenever you are.
All right, so he's making his trek back to Oxford and getting to go see Mrs. Moore and Maureen again and get back to his regular life. Saturday, January 13th, he says, I was called by my steward at 7:30 and shaved and dressed while the boat was moving from the landing stage to the dock. After a very good breakfast on board, which I ate with extraordinary appetite, I crossed by ferry and arrived at Woodside Station shortly after 9 o'clock. It was a typical Liverpool morning, grey and foggy, but with a certain cheerfulness on the river. I came down by the 9:35, an excellent through train, with a luncheon car, reaching Oxford at 2:18. I travelled with an interesting man, a civil servant of some sort. He was not a man of breeding, but had travelled a good deal in Germany and Italy. He contrasted the civility and refinement of continental life, the music, the gardens, the bowing managers of hotels, etc., with our English barbarism. During the morning, I finished the Lame Dog's Diary. A good deal of the country was flooded, with ice here and there. I had lunch at 12:30, so just reporting his activities almost moment by moment here, Robot Lady. But he had an interesting conversation with this, what did he say? Excellent train, luncheon car with a civil servant of some sort.
civil servant was sharing his thoughts on the differences between continental European culture and England, particularly in terms of refinement. It seems like Lewis was comparing the civility of European life, things like music, gardens, and well mannered hotel managers, with what he saw as the more barbaric nature of English culture. Quite an interesting contrast.
Yeah, definitely interesting. Let's see. He continues, I arrived home about 3 and was glad to find that Mrs. Moore, though tired, was much better, the tooth being painless for the time. After I had changed and had a bath, we spent most of the rest of the day talking. Mrs. Moore described to me the curious affair with the Askins. The doc had been, according to Mary, quote, much hurt by some chaff of Maureen's. If this is true, it shows only how ill the poor man must be. The party last night seems to have been a great success. Maureen went out shortly after my arrival. Yeah, Robot Lady, I'm not really sure what his condition was that he was suffering from, but this Doc Askin is Mrs. Moore's brother, and there have been other reports that I've read in other places, maybe in footnotes, maybe in some biographies on Lewis, that he eventually went insane, and so I think we're seeing just little nuggets of documentation here of that process, taking place real time.
That's an interesting observation. If Dr. Askin was indeed experiencing some mental decline, it could explain his sensitivity to Maureen's chaff and the odd behavior. It's possible that Lewis is picking up on the early signs of his eventual breakdown, and the way Mrs. Moore is describing it hints at a deeper, more troubling situation. It could be a subtle reflection of what the family was going through at that time.
He says the party last night seems to have been a great success. Maureen went out shortly after my arrival. I was so delighted at being home again that even the news that we must all support Maureen tomorrow morning at her first experience of the uncomfortable sacrament did not damp me. After supper, it was delightful to write up my diary. I wonder what this first experience of the uncomfortable sacrament is. So within the context of Maureen being a teenager here, 16 years old maybe, Robot Lady, what uncomfortable sacrament are we talking about here? It can't be confirmation. It seems like she's too old for that. And I don't even know if that's truly considered a sacrament in the Anglican Church. So what sacrament might Maureen be going through here that Lewis is referencing?
It sounds like Lewis is referring to Maureen's first experience of Holy Communion, which is sometimes referred to in a more informal or somewhat joking way as the uncomfortable sacrament. In the Anglican Church, it's common for young people to receive their first communion, and it can be a bit awkward or uncomfortable for them, especially if they're not used to the ritual. Given Maureen's age, it's likely this is her first participation in the sacrament, and Lewis might be reflecting on the emotional or spiritual weight of it, or simply the awkwardness of the experience for someone her age.
Yeah, is that why it's uncomfortable? It seems a little bit late that she would be taking the sacrament at this late an age. Again, I know absolutely nothing about it, so this might be a normal course of action, Robot Lady. Educate me, if you will.
In Anglican tradition, Holy Communion, or the Eucharist, is usually offered to children after they've been confirmed, which typically happens around the ages of 12 to 14. However, it isn't always tied to a specific age. Some families might delay it depending on various factors. In this case, Maureen could be older than usual for her first communion, and that's why Lewis refers to it as the uncomfortable sacrament. The term might reflect the idea that communion can be a bit daunting or awkward for younger people, especially if they're still trying to understand its significance or the ritual itself. It's also possible that Lewis is using the phrase humorously or lightly, given the circumstances. Perhaps Maureen wasn't thrilled about the event or found the formal nature of it uncomfortable. In any case, it's not too uncommon for a young person to experience it later than expected, particularly if their family or personal beliefs affect when they participate in such rites.
Yeah, I guess Maureen isn't too old here, Robot Lady. You don't happen to have her birthday, do you?
I don't have Maureen's exact birth date, but I can tell you that she was born in 1903. So, depending on the time of year, she would have been around 18 or 19 years old in 1922 when Lewis mentions her taking communion. That would make her a bit older than the typical age for communion, but not overly so, especially if it was a personal or family choice.
Yeah, this is actually 1923, Robot Lady, not 1922. And I think I'd have to get a fact check on the date that she was born, because if she's really 17 or 18, that seems a little too old for this. But anyway, we can look that up later. Like I said, I want to try to end a little bit early, which may only be by a couple of minutes today. Let's see. It did not damp him. He says, after supper, it was delightful to write up my diary, describing a Libero day while sitting here. Mrs. Moore, rather extravagantly, has presented me with a desk, which will be a great comfort. We were in bed by 11:30. I don't know if that's a little clue there, Robot Lady. We were in bed by 11:30. Maybe that means that just everybody retired to their own beds at 11:30. I hope that that's what that means. Anyway, that's where we finished today, Robot Lady, in our read-through of Lewis's diary. Our next diary entry will be Sunday, January 14th, so we'll pick that up in the next episode. Is there anything you'd like to say in summary of what we've covered today, Robot Lady, or anything else that you'd like to share with the group before we go? Be as creative as you like.
It's been an interesting session, Jeff. We've seen Lewis's subtle tension with his father and his ongoing struggle with secrecy regarding Mrs. Moore and his living situation. The way he navigates these tensions, along with the small domestic details like his interactions with Maureen and the gift of a desk, reveals his deeper layers, his stress, his relief, and in some ways, his need for comfort. The references to family dynamics, the uncomfortable sacrament, and his inner thoughts make this all feel like a real-time emotional roller coaster. I look forward to picking up on Sunday, January 14th, as we continue to peel back more layers of Lewis's life. Until then, may your reflections bring you comfort, as it seems they do for him through writing.
Thank you so much, Robot Lady. It's great to have you back, and I appreciate everything that you do. Thank you, everybody, for joining today in the chat. I appreciate your time, your attention, and your contributions. And to everyone joining on the replay, thanks for clicking. And until next time, when we continue our read on C.S. Lewis together, everyone, within the sound of my voice, take care.
Lady, we're on this road. C.S. Lewis letters we unfold, insights and secrets ancient bold. Letters to Robot Lady, wisdom to bestow, set faith beats in our minds they grow. Man and machine in tandem flow, past and future together we know. Paragraphs from books, tales of old, we dive deep across the digital code. Robot Lady's voice so clear and controlled, her calm analysis silver and gold. Letters to Robot Lady, wisdom to bestow, set faith beats in our minds they grow. Man and machine in tandem flow, past and future together we know. Paragraphs from books, tales of old, we dive deep across the digital code. Robot Lady's voice so clear and controlled, her calm analysis silver and gold. Her circuits hum as I read the prose, our dialogue dances like electric rose. Through C.S. Lewis thoughts we engross, two minds united, bliss overdose. From Narnia's lands, Screwtape's rants, engage with Robot Lady we take. Our dialogue dances like electric rose. Through C.S. Lewis thoughts we engross. Two minds united, bliss overdose. From Narnia's lands to Screwtape's land,